All right, guys. So I am here again for another lesson. Today I'm going to be talking about compressors and compression in general. We've talked about this in 206 and advanced electronic music if you've taken those classes, but I just want, this is one of those things that took me a long time to get a handle on. So I thought doing a video on it and then talking about mixing vocals in Logic would be useful. Hopefully you had a chance to listen to that track that I emailed to you because that's the track I'm going to be using in Logic to explain these concepts. So take a listen to that song that I emailed to you. It's called Paper Thin and it's on my SoundCloud. So compressors are so incredibly important to modern mixing and sound, and we really wouldn't have we wouldn't have the sounds that we have. We wouldn't be able to mix the music that we have without compressors. It would just be a completely different music. So one way of thinking about compressors, how they work, one of the most useful analogies is if you've ever listened to classical music is actually recorded usually with very little compression. And you can really tell this in listening to recordings of it. So if you've ever listened to recordings of classical music, for example, it's very common that there are times where it's really loud and there are times where it's really quiet. And if you're listening in your car, for example, you might constantly have to adjust the volume. Like you're grabbing the knob to turn it up because it's really quiet, and then you have to turn it down again because it gets too loud, or it's a constant process. And if you go to a concert, that is a normal, that's the way the music was composed, and the only reason that we record it that way is because that's how it was originally intended. But there is a lot, there's definitely a kind of battle. You can talk to Dan Wood about this, about people over compressing music and that compressors are used so much. So when you use a compressor, which is most of our music, as you know, when you sit and listen to something, it's consistently loud, right? Even when there are only a few instruments playing, you hear plenty of sound at all times. And that is not the way music is in real life, right? When I have a band playing or something, if we go to take away instruments, the dB should go down, but with compressors it doesn't, because there's a constant adjustment to that intensity, and also we're doing some things to make it consistently loud all the time, okay? And that makes a big difference in kind of the way recordings work, and also just the way things sound and the way we're able to mix them together. So compressors then are, compression in particular, is the process of lessening the dynamic range between the loudest and quietest parts of an audio signal. This is done by boosting the quieter signals and attenuating the louder signals. Now, if you don't know this word attenuation, it means to reduce, okay? So the general, if you think about it, what we're doing is, if you have a mountain range that is very dynamic, right? You have some very deep valleys and you have some very high peaks. What we're doing is we're bringing up the valleys to be higher. We're reducing the peaks down to make everything a little bit more in the same range, okay? So if you imagine if the possibilities in volume are between 0 and 100, what we're doing is saying, what a compressor does is say, what I'm going to do is bring up that 0 to a 40, and I'm going to bring that 100 down to a 60. So that way our range now, instead of being 100 values, is only 20 values in the middle, right? And then generally what happens is we then boost everything up so it's just loud. And so we can now take our 20 values and make them between, 70 and 90, okay? So let me explain the most important concepts involved in compression. The first is the threshold, okay? The threshold is how loud a signal has to be before compression begins to be applied, okay? So if I'm going to run through these quickly and then cover them again. So that's the threshold, and this is Logic's plug-in compressor. All compressors have these same knobs or buttons on them. You just have to find where they are, but they all basically do the same thing. So the threshold is waiting for a certain decibel level before it engages, basically, okay? The ratio is next, and the ratio is how much compression is applied. For example, if the ratio is 6:1, the compressor reduces a 6 decibel signal to 1 decibel. Okay, so I always like to think about this too. Like, it's basically, imagine you're holding the volume knob on a stereo or whatever, if you guys know what a stereo is. And you're adjusting that level all the time based on the intensity of the signal. It's like happening in real time, and it's very sensitive, and it's constantly being turned down at every time there's a loud sound, okay? So the threshold then is how loud is it before the engaging happens, right? It engages. The ratio is how much did that knob get turned down when the compressor is applied, okay? The next one is the knee. The knee sets how the compressor reacts to the signal once the threshold is passed. So a hard knee setting means it clamps the signal straight away, and a soft knee means that the compressor kicks in more gently as the signal goes further past the threshold. So in general, the way this works is a hard knee is like says it instantly stops, instant sound stop or sound reduction. A soft knee might actually slowly turn it down a little bit, like make it more gradual and a little bit softer, meaning the intensity of that signal change is less, okay? All right, the next two are the attack and the release. The attack time, these are easy. How quickly the compressor reacts in milliseconds, okay? So if I have a slow attack time, that means my knob, as it turns down, is reacting slower. It's going slower down than it would if it was a fast attack time. The same thing is true with the release. How quickly the compressor reacts or lets go once the compressor compresses the signal. That's really bad English right there. Let me just get out of it. How quickly the compressor reacts or lets go once it compresses the signal, okay? So the compressor obviously is released, right? When the compressor doesn't detect a signal above the threshold, the compressor stops compressing. And so the release time is how fast does the sound return to normal, right? The signal return to full normal signal. So, okay, so let's then talk here about, oh, I'm sorry, I missed one. The last one. Oh, don't tell me. Oh, here we go. Oof, internet has been bad lately. So the last one is the makeup, okay? So once I squash down those big peaks in my sound, then obviously the idea with a compressor is that I can then raise the volume, all right? So the makeup allows you to boost the compressed signal, as compression often attenuates the signal significantly. So attenuation, again, is cutting off the peaks of the sound. But what that allows me to do then is I can now boost the entire signal because I've lost the highest end, right? The big peaks have been softened down, and so therefore I'm able to raise the whole signal up to be louder. So what's interesting is that compressors, if you think about the term compression, it sounds like what it means is to squash something, right? It compresses it together. And that's exactly what happens. It compresses it together, but then that allows you to then use something like makeup to add more overall volume, okay? So let's take a look at this in action in music. So we have this song here, and this is the Logic Project. These are, let's listen to these vocals without any effects on them at all, okay? Hopefully this sounds okay to you. I bought a new USB mic to use for these, and hopefully I get a better quality from them. So let's listen to this.
Touch my skin, it's paper thin tonight. Close my eyes, we'll be alright tonight. Kiss my lips, my soul it rips tonight. Close my eyes, we'll be alright.
Okay, so that's the original recording with a couple takes in it, so they've been cut up a little bit. But one really interesting thing to look at is this channel right under it. So this is actually the compressed channel, okay? And you can see it's been converted from stereo to mono. Oh, I want to stop doing that. Why is it? View, undo that zoom focus, because I want you to see these next to each other kind of at the same, in the same size, okay? So there are a lot of effects on this vocal, but you can see I'm missing some of them. We did a little bit of pitch correction, but don't need a whole lot. And then I have another vocal enhancer down here from Waves plugin that I'm using, but it's off. So, but just look at the difference between these two channels, right? You can see that the original signal is way more dynamic, right? It's louder, first of all, but also the peaks are higher, right? The peaks have been pushed up, and a really good example is this bit right here. So, and there's a couple other things happening in here as well. Let me show you another couple things we're doing. I'm also reducing the gain with automation in a couple spots that were a little bit popping out, and I wanted to reduce that level some, so I reduced them. And you can see that reduction right here in the bounce, right? This is a bounce of the original up here. So what happens then, of course, is that all the peaks get crushed down. And so what that actually allows me to do is to increase the gain of the entire track. And unfortunately, you can't see that gain in there, but it is happening, right? There's this overall volume level gain. In fact, let me undo that. If I select this track, oh, I think it does it for all of them. Yeah, it does. I was hoping to raise this up so it looked more like this. But you can see what it does is it squashed those peaks down and then given me a decent signal. So if I go back to here, let's turn on the effects now and listen to this a little bit with these effects. Notice I have 4 buses here too, which we're going to talk about that briefly in a minute. But there are 4 buses. I was wondering if my video was still going good. 12 minutes. All right. So there are 4 buses here that I'm also outputting too. So when I turn on these effects, you're going to also hear the buses. So the sound is going to get way bigger because I'm sending to more channels, right, and outputting through those. So let's solo this again. This got muted somehow. Oh, I always do that. Wrong button. Mute. There we go.
Touch my skin. It's paper pen tonight. Close my eyes. We'll be alright tonight.
Okay, so you can see there's a lot of things going on here. And actually, let's just listen to this track because this is the master output. This is the recording of all the buses, I think, and all of the plugins from here. Even the ones that are missing, I bounced it from my desktop computer. Let me hear this. Let's hear this.
Touch my skin.
No, I need to turn the buses on. Let me turn these back on, and then you'll hear the whole thing.
Touch my skin. It's paper pen tonight. Close my eyes. We'll be alright tonight. Kiss my lips, my solid ribs tonight. Close my eyes. We'll be alright.
Okay, so it's kind of just totally dramatic, right? How much this has changed from these plugins and from the compressor. So one of the first things, obviously, that I'm doing here is EQ, right? I've got to get rid of that low frequency stuff that doesn't have any business in here. This is a cut of kind of a frequency range that kind of makes this intensely harsh in a certain register, so I just cut it out, okay? And then I'm trying to brighten this up a little bit, so I raise the 2K mark, and then there's a low pass at the top, right? My compressor is doing lots of stuff. So let's look at the graph because you can really see this in action. All right, the graph will show you as the compressor actually working. And if I go to the meter, it will show you this too, because the meter will come on. Let me mute this. I'm soloing this track. I guess I didn't need to mute because I'm soloing, but here we go. So watch the graph or the meter.
Touch my skin.
So when you see that meter go up, what's happening is it's cutting the top, right? That's showing you that the threshold's been reached and something is being attenuated or reduced in gain. If I go to the graph, you can really see this. The ratio here is 3.6 to 1. So if basically what that means again is that if the decibel is 3.6, it's going to be reduced down to a 1, right? So it's going to be almost 3 times or more than 3 times, almost 4 times quieter when the threshold is reached, okay?
Touch my skin.
So you see it right here?
You
You can see it popping in and out.
Close my eyes. We'll be alright tonight.
So once again, these little white lines here are showing you what's being compressed. These high peaks. It's actually not a lot of compression in this mix, but I'm also, I'm doing some other things to bring the volume up at specific moments. My knee is at 0, meaning that the softness of the knee is not anything. In fact, you can kind of watch this. If I crank the ratio up, you'll see the compression here, right? It's basically saying once it reaches this threshold, it's going to flatten out the volume, okay? Also, watch the knee if I turn this up. See how that harsh, that quick on-off is being sloped down a little bit to be softer. That's what a soft knee means when it's like at a 1, right? So anyway, so this is just doing that. My makeup gain is not very much, 1 decibel up, right? Which is not very much in volume. But again, my compressor is not doing a whole lot in this music. My release time is very fast. My attack time is 10 milliseconds. That's very fast. Okay. So, but that's basically what's happening. The next thing I have is a de-esser, which is a really cool effect that helps reduce the semblances of the sound, or what are called fricatives. When you say things and there's harsh S sounds and these high frequencies pop out from the consonants of words, it helps to reduce those some, okay? So the next thing I want to talk briefly about here is, I'm sorry, I keep clicking on this so I can see my time. Yes, okay, so I've been talking for 20 minutes almost, is to talk about these buses, all right? So I'm sending to 4 different buses here. The first one is a really cool effect that I'll talk about. It's using a delay with a compressor on it. The next one is a space designer, okay? Then we have, it's just a reverb, another compressor with a channel EQ on it. So, and then the last one, is a doubler that's actually missing. So, and that just is kind of like a chorus effect, okay? So let's go back here and talk about different types of effects, okay? And this is a really important concept too. The idea of serial effects versus parallel effects, okay? And you guys might have heard the term parallel compression versus serial compression before. So let's talk about this. Serial effects is applying plugins in series, one after another, and then sending them to the main outs or sending them to whatever, okay? Parallel effects, and I said FX here because it could be anything, but in this case we're talking about compressors, but it could be a reverb or a delay or whatever. Parallel effects are applying plugins to several copies of the same channel with different effects. The different effects in them, and then mixing them together. Okay, so let's take a look at this. So if I'm doing serial effects, I have my source that then goes to an effect like a delay. Then the delay is passed to another effect, a reverb. And then it's passed to maybe another effect, a chorus. And then it outputs, okay? And that is your classic serial effect, right? And I do that. We do that all the time when we put effects plugins into the channel strip, okay? The second type is called parallel effects. And that's when I have a source, but then we send the source, usually with buses, to three other channels. And this first one might be a delay, but then and this one's a reverb, and this one is a chorus, but then they are sent to the output separately, okay? And the difference here is this. In serial effects, if I have a delay in here that then gets passed to the reverb now is going to have the delay in it, right? And then I'm going to take the reverb and delayed sound and send it to the chorus. And so now I have three effects piled up that are then outputting to the main output. In a parallel effect, here's the delay, but the delay goes straight to the output without reverb, right? Then I have reverb here, and it goes straight to the output, but there's no reverb on my delay because it's in a different channel. And then finally, my chorus is also outputting by itself, right? And we're mixing these three different, basically, versions of the same music into a single channel, okay, into the output. And that's what I'm doing here in these vocals, all right? That's what all these buses are doing. So here is your serial compression or your serial effects, right? These are happening in series in a row. And here I'm sending to 4 different channels that then have other effects on them that are then going to the stereo output, okay? So if we look at this first one again, this is one of the coolest effects we've got, I think. What I'm doing is I have a stereo delay on here, but what's really cool is I have a compressor that's listening actually to itself. The compressor is listening to the vocals and it's reacting to those vocals in real time. And what that does is it prevents the delay from being in the way when the vocals are sounding, okay? So when the voice is singing, the delay is pushed down, so it doesn't make a lot of reflections. But when the voice stops singing, like at the end of a phrase, the compressor releases and all those nice delays come out, all right? So let me silence these and you can hear this.
Touch my skin. It's paper tonight. Close my eyes. We'll be alright tonight.
So this is particularly effective here because it's a dramatic delay, right? This is a very long delay, and so the effect is dramatic. And if I just let those delays pile up over top of all the vocals, I won't be able to understand anything, okay? So then the next channel, let's listen to the next channel. Actually, I'm going to output this to no output, so you can only hear this channel. Let's click on this one again. And now all you're going to hear is this delay.
Touch my skin. It's paper tonight.
Okay? Now let's listen to the next one. This is the delayed channel, or this is a big reverb, I believe. Right? So now I'm sending to this reverb channel. That's in parallel, it's a parallel effect. And then the next one is a really funky, super compressed channel, actually. Look at the ratio, 30:1. And what this does is it brings out some major mix in here. I believe also, no, the makeup's at 0. I thought it would be really high. The knee is really high as well. Let's listen to this. And the threshold is really low, negative 32 dB. So this is going to engage really quickly. It's probably going to sound super funky.
Touch my skin.
No, it's just super present, right?
It's paper thin tonight.
So you can see how tight that sound is. Very, very clear and understandable. And it's sending itself out the mix, right? Unfortunately, the last one won't work because I don't have the doubler on here, but think of it as a chorusing effect, okay? Anyway, so that is how I'm mixing all these vocals together, right? And this is a very effective way of mixing vocals and adding effects to them in what's called parallel compression or parallel effects. So In particular here, parallel compression is this channel itself, the second one, right? Here, oh no, I'm sorry, not the second one, the third one. This is parallel compression. I have a channel with a compressor on it, and it's the sound is being sent there separately and being compressed separately. And then there's also a main compressor, and I'm using just a plug-in, Classic Vocal, and it is another compressor. So, but if we look at this track, if I go back to my output, which was supposed to be 30 all music, I have 5 different tracks singing this vocal, right? All of these buses and the main output actually, which is bus 30, which is actually all the music. Okay? Anyway, so hopefully that's, interesting to you, and, you can hopefully you get a sense too of just how much this changes the sound, right? Like it's a dramatic change from our original vocal to the final version. And the reason we listen to that disturbed version of Sound of Silence is to show you how intensely different it is from the original, right? His original vocals probably don't sound nearly that great. I mean, he does have a good voice, I think, but the vocals have been drastically different. They've been photoshopped quite a bit, right? And this is very common for most of our music these days, right? There is just a lot of photoshopping going on. And, I don't have a problem with it. Some people do. Some people think it's inauthentic, but it doesn't bother me. And obviously, though, I like highly produced music, so it makes sense that I wouldn't have a problem with this. Anyways, so that is it for today's lesson. I will be posting a quiz about this and this video on YouTube. So you need to take a look at this video. I will also send you a PDF of the PowerPoint presentation, so you can use this as a study guide for your little test. And let me know if you have any questions. Again, office hours tomorrow from 2 to 4 if you want to hang out. I'll be in there. If no one has any questions, maybe I'll play Eve online and show you how amazing it is. I don't know. We can just chat. I don't know. We can do whatever. So, see you later.